Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm really excited for this show because I've talked so much lately about how we need to build. We need to start making things to, not fix the existing system, but to replace it with better ideas. And so today's guests are going to talk about something they've undertaken to do just that. But before we begin, I want to say that if you are new to the channel and interested in being part of the solution to our education crisis, I hope you will subscribe to be notified when I make new content or have wonderful guests like the ones I'm about to have. Please also like and share this broadcast so others can benefit from the information we're about to share. Each of these shows is an opportunity to hear from people who are working to improve education in America any way they can, and this one is no exception. Today, we're going to meet Luke Grimm and Brian Perry. They are dads. They are Christian dads who are, one of whom is a high school teacher, and they are making something in the way of life skills education, a newsletter, and a website called These 16 Things that they want to share with you, my audience, and your kids, so your kids can learn things they're not learning in school. And we're going to have a conversation today about what prompted them to do this, what their offering is, and probably tie in some other stuff like SEL. We have some information for you from Luke in particular, who's been studying to get his licensure for being a principal, being an administrator, and he's got some inside baseball for us on that score. So without further ado, let's welcome our guests, Brian and Luke. Hi, guys. Welcome to The Reason We Learn.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
You're so welcome. Thanks for making me aware of what you're doing. It's very exciting. So before we dive into all that, why don't we just have you guys tell us who you are, a little bit about your background, and how you got involved in education.
Sure. I'll go first here. My name is Brian Perry. Both of us really live in central Indiana, I'm outside of Indianapolis. He's a little closer. And I have my own business. I own a painting, pressure washing business, and I have 7 kids. We homeschool the 7 kids. And by we, I mean my wife homeschools our 7 kids. I help out a little bit here and there with the school side, and I do more with the life skills side, I guess. And how the whole project got started was, to be honest, I heard something else about things to teach kids that schools aren't teaching them. And I loved the idea. I told my wife right away, I said, we have to do something around this. We already teach a lot of these things, and nobody is going to sit there and teach their kids every one of these 16 topics. But I said, we like to teach our kids a lot of this stuff. So let's start a project based on this. And at first I had no idea what that was going to be. It took me months of rolling it around in my head, then months of creating some content, and then got the website started, and I pulled Luke in immediately. We've been friends for a few years now. And as you'll probably see in this video, that Luke he's a natural teacher, just a better speaker, and I thought that it'd be much better to bring him in. And I'm kind of the big picture guy, and he's like I said, the natural teacher. So, Luke.
Awesome.
So maybe because I have more kids than you, we have 8 kids in my house. Yeah.
Oh my God. I was like, wait to hear he's got 7. You have more kids. I'm like,
and we're done. So it's up to him and his wife to catch up. They can or they can't. It's on them. So my wife and I, my name's Luke. My wife is Tia. We live in the south side of Indianapolis. I'm 43 years old. I teach high school government for 12th graders, and I also run the alternative education program for our seniors and juniors that are upside down in credits, that if left to their current path, they will not graduate. I was born in Long Beach, California. Spent 18 years under my dad. That he was a military guy. Under a single dad for a while after divorcing there. And when I graduated high school, I joined the Army. So I spent 20 years in the active duty Army. I've been out about 5.5 years, and I am officially a walking cliche of a veteran that decides to go teach at some sort of a history course. And yeah, you were right in the intro. Next week, I'll be taking the licensure test to be a building administrator. Maybe I make it, maybe I don't. I'm not sure if I want it, if we're being very frank. I've been a little disheartened being in the system a while, but that's the path I'm looking at. Absolutely.
Now, you say you've been disheartened about being in the system. What's your story along those lines? Because I know a lot of people watching this channel are here because they're disheartened by the system. So people would like to hear other people's stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe wholeheartedly that people get into teaching because they want to do something good. Some people get into teaching because they don't have a clue what they're going to do. They leave high school, go straight into college, get a 17th century French poetry degree, and clearly you can't do anything with that. So you go teach elementary. I'm not mad at that, not judging anybody, but there are people that follow that path. But we're talking about the admin side here, and I've noticed that we have I don't want to call it a mental health, a behavioral health, a discipline issue. We have an issue in America with students and parents. I'm finding too many. Too many parents are allowing certain things to happen, certain behaviors, uh, kids not being able to conform to high school and this and that, and leaves admin thinking, what do we do with this mess? Seriously, what do we do? The best, most level-headed admin has to make a decision. Do I fight against the parents and say we have a parenting issue and the kid has some issues we need to work through? Or do we just accept and say, oh, this is another social emotional learning issue? And let's find the real patterns. And it's probably the teacher's fault. Let's fix the teacher. And nobody wins. The kid eventually leaves high school, I guess, and they're not ready to function because they've been told all of these things are okay. When they leave high school, they realize all of these things are not okay. They can't hold a job and staying with the parents till they're 30, I guess. I don't know.
Now, that's interesting. You said, that there it leaves the administrators with sort of two choices. Do we go to the parents and say we have a parenting issue, or do we try to handle it in-house with social emotional learning? I talk a lot about social emotional learning on the channel, and my argument has been you can't really instruct this stuff. I mean, you might be able to take a small group of kids or one-on-one and work on, individual skills that they're missing if you can really pinpoint this is a skill issue, right? But so often it's not a skill issue. It's a whole cultural, like, what they think is okay and what's esteemed versus what really isn't okay and esteemed. And that's tough to instruct out of somebody. That's got to be like how you live. And at the same time, I also don't think it's necessarily the job of the principal to go parent the parents or educate the parents. Right. So it's a tough place. It's like our schools are asked to do things that schools ought not be doing. And then we have this thing called social emotional learning where it looks like the government and even some private schools want to take it on. They're like, hey, let's do it. Let's reparent these kids. And I just think that is dangerous, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I consider SEL like a math equivalency, 2 equals 2. SEL equals what? What does it mean? If we don't reach a common definition, it's like the word evolution. Well, what do you believe in evolution? Well, can we define evolution first and then talk about it? SEL, if you're on the outside, it sounds like, well, social. Okay, so we're trying to find habits and trying to get into their psyche and try to calm them down when they're stressed, trying to find what works and trying to de-escalate. These things do sound great. Thinking about the kid and an individual child, and they are. What ends up happening is the end state, and I may be crucified by other teachers listening to this, but the end state is poor behavior continues because poor behavior is not truly called out. Poor behavior is not truly addressed. And just the way that I said that, poor behavior implies the kid did something. Yeah, yes. There's a reason a teacher has to call admin for help, has to call the dean for help because some poor behavior, but we allow that kid to go back in and they breathe into, and again, on the outside, it briefs really well. If I put up a PowerPoint presentation, SEL sounds great. People get hired on to go be the SEL specialist.
Right.
It does, it briefs well, but in practice, kids are put back in the classroom with poor behavior. Poor behavior is continued. And teachers watch this and teachers are going to walk. Teachers will go find another job.
Right. Well, people feel unsafe too. Now, Brian, do you have experience working in schools at all, or what are you doing? I mean, aside from being a dad, which is a big job in and of itself. But what are you? What's your work that you do?
So I do not have experience being in schools at all, other than growing up and going to school. That's it. Work wise, I have my own painting, pressure washing business. Um, so I do that here, and my dad did it when I was growing up, and I worked for him and left. Went to college, did other things afterwards, and just didn't like some of the stuff I was doing. It wasn't bad. I just didn't enjoy the career path I was going down, and decided to go back to work for my dad, and then eventually bought the business. So nothing to do with that, but my point, I guess, on the SEL is, and I hadn't really heard much about this because I'm not involved in those same things,
Right.
being that our kids are homeschooled. But what I can say is, if my kid has some bad behavior, and maybe they're acting out and having, we'll just use the terms of a bad emotional day, or they need a mental health break. Yeah, we can give them a mental health break. We can give them 5 minutes to go calm down or something, but they still have to be accountable for their actions. And we can't just say, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. You just need a mental health break, and you act the way you need to act, or the way you want to act, and we'll just move on like nothing ever happened. In fact, it sounds like I'm having my 2-year-old must be having a mental health break, or episode right now out there. But we still hold our kids accountable, because when they're adults, what are you gonna do when you're at work and maybe you get upset and start yelling at your coworkers, go off on your coworkers or something, or just
Right.
don't do the work? Are they gonna, is their boss gonna say, sure, we understand that you have bad days, and sometimes maybe it does come down to just a bad day, but you do that enough, you're not going to have a job. So kids need to learn how to function in life, to where they can get over some of those things.
Well, that's so true, and it's. I'm really glad that both of you brought this up. The missing piece is consequences, and consequences are part of reality, as you both have pointed out in real life. And I know a lot of people come down to me if they'll say, not everything has to be about a job. Okay, fine. How many friends are you going to have? How great is your life going to be? People don't want to be around you because you're so emotionally reactive, or you're emotionally demanding on other people's boundaries, but nobody can make a demand on your boundaries, because that's essentially the message they're giving to kids when they say, "Oh, you behaved this way. It means you need something and we need to accommodate this need." The lesson over time is, my needs are important. Empathy for me is important, but I don't really need to worry about the other people I've inconvenienced, made feel uncomfortable, or anything that my behavior has caused in a negative way, because there's not been a consequence. And that's not going to work well for you, even not on a job. Your relationships will suffer. You're not going to thrive as a human being if you walk around demanding empathy from everybody else while being absolutely incapable of feeling it for others. And it is a two-way street. People will say, but it's empathy if we say, "Oh, you're having a bad day, let's let you have a timeout." Is it though? Or is that just the easiest way for you, the disciplinarian, to get off easy, right? They're not going to be mad at you. The kid who's already having a bad day isn't going to also be mad at you because you delivered a consequence. It feels like a little too easy.
I mentioned I spent 20 years in the Army, and the Army has a course you can send non-commissioned officers to. It's called Master Resilience Training, MRT. And we would send a staff sergeant maybe to go to this 2-week training, and they'd come back, and once a month or once a quarter, they would give us like a little module. And one of them, there's an image that will always stick with me, is you got a whole room full of soldiers in uniform, and the instructor's up there, they're holding a tennis ball, then they're holding an egg. And the first time I saw this, it really stuck. It's like, you're having the day, you're having that horrible day. Pick it, whatever you want to add in there. And the person turns around, just throws that egg at the wall as hard as they can. That could be you. Then okay, what about this guy? And then they turn around and throw the tennis ball, and it bounces back. And the visual makes sense once you get it. Can we bounce back from adversity? And the word I love for this is grit. Now, with SEL, before it had the phrase SEL, it was teaching people how to cope. We just didn't use the phrase SEL. We're talking about how to problem solve, how to regulate yourself. If you need breathing techniques, and these are good because some people struggle and they need to know how to cope. I'm good with that. Learning how to cope through stress is healthy. The problems, in my opinion, arose when we started including DEI in a lot of these things. Now we have microaggressions included in there. Now we have systemic racism included in there. Now we have intersectionality and cross-sectionality and critical race theory and all of these different buzzwords. And when you throw them in there, what happens is the student starts to hear, it's not my fault. People did things to me, and I just have to find a way to recover from that. So the consequence, there's no real consequence. You're learning how to deal with others. So when you leave high school, you never had to deal with your own behavior. So I think it's really transformed into something. I think it started out okay. How to compose yourself, how to recover, how to cope. But now things aren't your fault. And if nothing's your fault, when you leave high school, you're in for a world of surprise when things are your fault, and you will face consequences.
Well, and there'll be some kids because everybody's a little different in their personality, right? You have kids who are very giving kids, they're pleasers, right? With different kinds of personalities. You'll have those kids who say, "Not my fault." I would call them takers to a certain degree, and then you'll have the kids. I have one of these myself, who make other people's emotions their responsibility. So the flip side of the same coin is when you start talking about microaggressions or somebody else's, they start almost obsessively worrying about what others are going to think or what they're going to feel about something they thought or they said or they did. And boundaries disappear. They start feeling that they don't have a right to have boundaries. And to your point about DEI with the intersectionality scale, if you happen to be one of the people designated privileged, and that's drilled into your head over and over and over again, the message is you don't get to have boundaries, little Mr. Privileged. You have to give, you have to do, you have to give back, you have to accommodate, you have to step back, you have to pause, you have to be quiet, you have to let others go first. And so as many kids as you'll have saying, "Not my fault, I get to trample all over everybody else's convenience and calm and whatever," you'll have kids who lay down for them, tolerate the intolerable, and some very bad things can happen. And so, I think there's a fair amount of that going on. And then you have new kinds of not coping. So I genuinely believe that the kids who end up in the "I have to please everyone" mode, start looking for ways, it's subconscious, start looking for ways to protect themselves, to be allowed to have boundaries again. Well, what's the easiest way to be allowed to have a boundary again? I'm changing my pronouns. I am no longer a girl, or I'm no longer a boy. Now you have a little protective bubble wrap around you. You have this natural built-in boundary where people supposedly can't criticize you, hurt you, etc. Whereas before, if you were just a regular little white girl or a little whatever, little white boy, and yes, I'm going to go ahead and say it, white, because that's where the intersectional scale
Absolutely right.
tends to cut off. You aren't starting out with the same protective boundaries assumed. We were all supposed to have individual rights, right? And I'm me and you're you, and I end here and you begin. And I don't think that SEL allows that.
There was a book that 2 of the 12 classes through my master's in ed leadership here in Indiana, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paul Freire. Principles and assistant principals to accept this pedagogy about the oppressed and the oppressor. 12 out of 12 classes, we were forced to write about critical race theory and all of these doctorate, these writings, these articles, these scholarly articles. Yeah, those were the readings, and we were expected to highlight the good stuff and bring it in and discuss it. Then we're expected to reference it in our papers. And these people, when we graduated, go off to elementary, middle, and high schools to become principals, and they think that they learned something enlightening. So when they pull in these teachers, it's a tough cycle right now. It's pretty tough.
Yeah. And what do you think when people say there's no CRT in schools? What are you talking about? We don't teach that in schools.
Yeah, it's an absolute lie. Absolutely. The school I'm in now, I currently teach an online high school. I left my last high school because of politics. I was forced. Every single teacher was forced to insert Black Lives Matter into all of our curriculums.
When you say forced, like they
Forced.
came to you and said, do it or you'll be fired?
Well, I mean, the implication is you will be. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You must insert BLM. And at the time I was teaching 12th grade economics and government, I said, I will, but I don't think it's going to be the way. So I'm a conservative, and of the 33 staff, very well known, I was the one out of 33 that was conservative, and they let me teach government. It was super cool. But then I left, and our new lead came in for humanities. She was a self-professed social justice warrior. What does that mean? So
Yeah.
politics, I walked. The school I'm at now, the principal does her darndest to keep all of that out.
Yeah.
I will give it to the principal I'm at now. But yeah, critical race theory is absolutely in the schools. It was at a middle school I started teaching, then at the high school.
Yeah.
Yes, 100% without a doubt, it is in the schools.
Well, I want to pivot and talk about what you guys have been doing, and I'm going to show it because I want people to see what it looks like, that your website. Hold on one second. This is the website, these 16 things, and there
Look at
you
those
can
good-looking guys.
Luke and Brian. And what we're just talking about now about, what's in the curriculum, we were talking about SEL, we're talking about the stuff. What I think is very cool about what you've done with these life skills is I feel like they're built in inoculation against some of those ideas. That's what I'm seeing here, is that there are life skills. They can be taught that way. Like, hey, these are things that you need to, understand. But at the same time, if a kid were exposed to this material, let's talk about things like where it is, how to learn independently. What's that word? Not as a group, not as a team. Learn independently. I'm responsible for my own, right? So how to deal with people. And there's information here that's going to conflict with the whole message that they're telling in the SEL. So at a minimum, if parents were teaching these lessons or exposing their kids to these lessons, there would be a nice, healthy friction between what's being taught in the school and what you're putting in front of them. And you can spark conversations. Your kids are going to have questions, and that's what you want, right? You want to be able to challenge that stuff without necessarily going, teacher's wrong and teacher's an idiot. I mean, that's going to be a problem. That doesn't usually go over well.
So if you wouldn't mind going back, you don't need to click on any of them, but we're going to change the bottom one, by the way. We've been waiting for the right thing, and it's going to have to do with the forming relationships, both friendship and intimate. But each one of these things, what makes us believe that our teachers went to college, got licensed in finances, got licensed in truth, got licensed in gender ideology and sexual orientation, got licensed in negotiating? They didn't. Just like myself, I got licensed to teach a very specific subject. Right. So we send our kids, and what makes us think that they're the best person for this?
Exactly.
The answer is that they are not. In fact, if you want to flip this on its head, as I'm a teacher now, don't misunderstand. As a teacher, my job is to talk to the kids, as opposed to what Brian's job is. Brian owns a painting business. He is out actually creating a service, talking to people, interacting, part of the economy. He has more experience in this stuff than a teacher does, because a teacher, by nature of our job, our 8-9 hours a day, is in a classroom talking to people that don't know what we do. Right. We're not learning these life things. We're not licensed to teach this stuff, but we send them to school, and we hope that our kids are going to learn our values. Just think about how asinine that is. We're hoping when we send kids to school, that teacher of 30 kids is going to teach my specific values to that kid. Not going to happen.
Or at a minimum, that they're not going to teach something that directly conflicts with your values, and more than that, challenges and denigrates your values, like says your values are bad. And that's what we're seeing right now in most cases, is we're seeing the schools they're teaching values. There's no question about it. They're just teaching that if your values are grounded in sort of individualism, Judeo-Christian values, the Enlightenment, the idea that you as an individual are, you have rights unto yourself, that you shouldn't be forced to give those up just because somebody else has less than you do. right? The whole equity idea of equal outcomes, like that is the antithesis of what America is about. And yet that's what they're teaching with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And of course, we know that none of those words really mean what they say they mean. Diversity doesn't mean that your conservative viewpoint is welcome in the classroom.
No,
It
does
means
not.
that we want the rainbow, colors of people, the way they look and all that. That doesn't mean viewpoints. As far
Diversity
as
is thought if it's my thought.
if it's my thought, right? And as far as equity, they mean equal outcomes. They're not interested in equality under the law. And inclusion is actually exclusion. We don't want either people or ideas that don't already uphold the equity and the particular brand of diversity that we like. So
there's a picture, Deb, talking about equity. You're probably familiar with it. It shows 3 people outside. You could probably find out while we're talking. 3 people outside of a baseball game. Yeah, I don't know if you're able to pull it up.
I'm going to go get it because it's I made one and I kind of like sort of fixed it.
Yeah,
also, but keep talking. I'll get it.
Yeah, I recall getting into a 20-minute spat with one of my professors. And for anyone listening, it's not about me, but I do have 4 master's degrees. The Army's paid for all 4. So I'm not a rookie when it comes to a college classroom. And I wasn't 24 years old. So I'll buck up to a professor. And so this image was pulled up. And it shows the 3 people looking over a fence trying to watch a game. And the short person is unable to see. The fence is too high.
Right.
The tall person has tons of clearance. Doesn't it? Way too high. Way too tall.
Uh-huh.
And then the next picture shows that the little person gets some boxes so they can finally see. The middle person gets 1 box. Now, here's the issue. To your point, Deb, it shows the opportunity. The outcome. Right. Equity equals giving people what they need. Now, here's the thing. In these master's programs, making principals and teachers at the bachelor's level, that is the image to teach people this. Ready? Give people what they need because we're all at different parts in life. And that sounds great. But when you look at that image, and I wish you could pull it up, that'd be great.
It's like I'm so frustrated because I literally just used this the other day.
Yeah.
And I have it. I know I did because I fixed it. There was one that had the different little boxes.
Yep, that's the one I would love to talk about and just dissect.
I edited it because I said, okay, this is not accurate. I got to fix it.
Anyone you find, I can probably work with. Literally anyone. So here's the issue, because this has now become a huge political issue, right? DEI. So do we want equity of opportunity, so everyone gets a chance, or do we want equity of outcome? If it's about outcome, Deb, you may be filthy rich.
Right.
Well, how about you give that to Brian and give that to me so that we all have the same outcome? Exactly. So in this image, the little person gets 2 boxes. So the little person can watch the baseball game. Where do those boxes come from?
Yeah, exactly.
I had the answer for you. It came from somebody else. Somebody else had to give up boxes so the other person could see. And everyone's got to look at that. What if that's you? Are you cool with that? Are you okay with that?
Exactly. Well, and then at the end, they're all stealing from the baseball game. That's the other thing that's so annoying.
Yeah, how about that?
It's not their property, and yet they're standing there looking at the baseball game, and this is going to drive me nuts. And of course, you know what's going to happen as soon as we're done with the show. I'm going to find it.
It's also a very flawed image, and people listening can kind of get the idea in that we're talking about height. It's a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change the kid's height. I would love the conversation of how do we teach people to go get their boxes? How do we teach them to go buy them, to work hard for them? But the image shows things that people cannot change to make the case of give people what they need. How about this? People can work hard.
Yes,
they can actually change their circumstances. So people that can change their circumstances, why would you just keep giving them stuff, which in turn is taken from somebody else? Everybody should have a problem with that.
Absolutely.
Everyone should.
And the whole thing is a false premise anyway. There's something that is called the there's a specific kind of fallacy where you look at something that is, and you assume because it started here, it will always remain there. So a kid, for example, born to so-called privilege, in other words, they have wealthy parents. Okay. And the assumption is, first of all, that money will, always be there, that it's there, that benefits the kid, that it means all kinds of other things in the kid's life are fantastic. What if this kid's completely neglected and the parents don't pay any attention to him? And the kid, I've taught kids like this. I taught my first grade class, my first teaching job. There was a kid, both parents were doctors. Okay. By all accounts, you think this kid is privileged by today's standards. His parents worked so much. They left him with a Spanish speaking nanny who spoke pretty much only Spanish. So the kid pretty much spoke Spanish better than English. He came to first grade not knowing his alphabet, not knowing his colors, not knowing how to count to 10. Okay, now, again, to look at him, you would think, well, surely he has all the advantages in the world. He must be, doing great. He might as well have come from the south side of Chicago and not had anybody ever who'd read a book in his house, because he was left with people, left with somebody who wasn't speaking English to him all day, wasn't reading to him. He wasn't able to do any of those things. Now, he was quite gifted at art and other things, but his parents were completely out to lunch when it came to helping their kid learn. And yet from the outside looking in, so you look at the three kids with the boxes and all that. We look at the tall kid as an example. See, he's tall, he can see over the fence. For all you know, he's as nearsighted as a bat, but he doesn't have glasses. His issue is he's tall, but he can't afford glasses, or his parents don't know he can't see because he's never complained about it. So he's standing there, he's tall, but he's like, I can't see the game. Then you could have the little guy on top of the boxes. Okay, so he's stacked up on top of the boxes. For all you know, he's got a genius IQ and, he's doing just fine. I mean, in other words, they're asking you to look at these seeming disadvantages, what you can see that's skin deep, or what you can see as a teacher, or you can see as an administrator that is really very superficial, and make a decision about where that kid is in their learning or access to learning based on what you can see with your naked eye. You don't know. It takes so much more. When I was in graduate school, we had to learn to observe our students over a long period of time, like at least a month per kid, and journal and things like that, to like watch them, watch how they learn, listen to them, talk to them, interact with them as individuals. It's the best thing my graduate school did. It was graduate school of education at Penn. So we know they suck now. and they kind of did then too, because they made us read Paulo Freire. But this is one thing that they did drill into us. Do not judge a book by its cover. You don't know, looking at that kid or even looking at these superficial characteristics of like what their parents have or don't have, where they are in their learning. It takes more. Don't take the easy way out and be superficial about it. And today it's like stereotypes all day. Let's use the stereotypes. There is the little thing with the kids on the boxes. That's what you should assume. Tall kid, definitely doing great. And that's not the right message.
So what I hear from you guys talking there is something I keep saying, why I push people to homeschool their kids, is that the schools aren't teaching how to think, they're teaching what to think. So our one of the things you read there, one of the things we teach is how to learn independently. And I think that's what schools are not teaching you. They're going to tell you what to learn. They're going to tell you that, let's just put it out there, in some of these schools, that white people caused all the problems in this country, and black people are just nothing but oppressed, if we're going to put it out there like that. Or if you are a straight white male, you have all of the advantages in the world. And if you're trans or if you're gay, we just need to feel sorry for you. We need to help you out. But if people can learn how to think independently, how to learn independently, how to have critical thinking, then right there, you can, if your kids can understand how to do that, they can debunk most of what people are saying. I mean, my kids and I know Luke's kids, we can sit down and have a conversation and just ask them a question that people in high school are learning right now. Or I know people outside, past high school, past college, that will still give the same arguments that they learned in high school. And I asked my 12-year-old, my 14-year-old, and something along those lines, and they can give me a pretty good answer on why that is dumb, why we should not be teaching something like that. So that's my 2 cents on what the kids are learning in school. Not our kids, but what kids are learning in school. I
couldn't agree more. That's exactly right. They just are they're not treating kids like individual people. Right. They're little avatars for groups. And it's really quite cruel, because kids are self-centered by nature. It's a survival skill, right? And they walk into an environment where, right away, this was true even before DEI. They're walking into an environment where there's a little, sort of social hierarchy. There's a literal hierarchy. The teacher's above you, all these kind of things. There's so many rules they have to learn about where do I fit into all of this. And then when you get the message that you are invisible, except insofar as you fit into a larger group, that to me is like a kind of soul death. Part of my complaint about SEL is I do think it's soul killing. It takes what is so unique and special about each person and says, that doesn't matter. You only matter when you are pursuing social justice, when you're pursuing a social or collective goal. And I did a show with Juana Trian about a week ago. We talked about socialist realism art. And she pointed something out to me, this phrase from the Stalinist era, from Gorky, that just hit me like a brick. He was adamant that individualism was just morally bankrupt and terrible, whatever. And he said, the hero is toil, and toil is unthinkable outside the collective.
Mm.
And that just I just went, ow. If I look at everything that SEL is, the Castle version of SEL and transformative SEL, that's the message. The message is, you need to be in constant effort to try to be part of the collective, to fit into the collective. And if you don't exist. Imagine being a kid. Now you can't articulate that. A kid's not going to sit there and say, I feel invisible. But I just know they do. I just know they do.
I sometimes feel like I'm at a loss on who is the biggest purveyor of this lie to our kids. Right? Just tonight, right before we started recording, my oldest daughter, 13, sharp as a whip, she came up and said, Dad, Julia was saying that Curious Case of Lemony Snicket, whatever the show is, it talked about two moms. And my kid came and reported to me. I said, well, I'll just kind of look for that stuff. You keep watching. But, Dad, there's one more thing. What else did you see? Well, at the end, during the credits of one of these, it said non-gender person. That was somebody's name in the movie. Non-gender person. Then it had the person's name, right? But that was their role. Not like Superman, about non-gender person. I looked at her and said, Eve, does that even make sense? And so to Brian's point, my child was able to articulate why that makes no sense in the world. Okay, this picture.
This is the picture. This is the original. This is the original one.
So the top row, of course, is what's pitched. So on the top left, everyone gets a box. That's equality. Everyone gets this. Boom. Everyone, you're off to the races. Here's your opportunity. And what this picture teaches us is the person in blue, the tall person, here's the phrase, from each their ability to each their need.
Oh, wow. Gosh,
Karl
communism.
Marx. That's Karl. You're staring at it. And it's pitched in colleges. You take from the person that doesn't need. So the little kid in purple, I got it. He needs it. If he wants to see the game, I get what they're trying to convey. But you straight up take it from someone that you declare doesn't need it. Nowhere in here do we see a voluntary exchange. You take it so everyone has the same outcome.
And then I love how they go reality. So now they've projected their values onto this, that the tall person isn't just I'm tall and I don't need the box. But it's as if the tall person has more boxes. That is inserting something extra in there that just isn't there. Okay. That's like somebody's imagination run wild. This isn't reality. The short one is in a hole. What are they trying to do? Even if we take this as figurative, okay. The assumption is that if you're disadvantaged, you're not just starting, you're not just all starting in the same place, but you're too short to see the game. You're a whole order of magnitude below that person. And the person who has the advantage is an order of magnitude above you. They're exaggerating for effect without any basis in reality and calling it reality. And then they say liberation. Now, here's your Paulo Freire. This is what he's taught, that the purpose of education is liberation. And so, of course, I couldn't resist. I had to put my own spin on it because this picture annoyed me. So I came in and did this. Critical pedagogy and praxis. This is what it is. This is standardization. This is what we had in public schools. We standardize because with governments providing schools, equality under the law means you get a standard. Everybody gets the same, because how else do you do it in a fair way when you're using tax dollars? That's just what you're going to get. If you want the government to educate you, you get standardization for the most part. A little bit of individuation, but not much. Accommodation is what we then moved to. There was a point in education we said, okay, let's try to accommodate the kids with special needs, the kids that, let's do our best to give those kids a little extra because they're not coming in the same place. Most of us educators were like, okay. I kind of see the point here. We're not really stealing from anybody to try to accommodate the kid with special needs. But this business down here of reality, no, that's somebody's wild imagination, and this is straight up theft. When you're giving it to them for free to make everybody the same, you're stealing from everyone. Mm-hmm. This is just straight up theft. So that's why I did that, because I'm sick of this picture and I wanted to translate it into actual English.
What I'd like to see, which you can't show in a picture like that, but is reality of off to the side, there's a ton of scrap wood and tools, and it shows that the person maybe with all the boxes up top spent 2 days building boxes over and over so they could have what they wanted. And the person that has no boxes and can't see just refused to do their own work and did not want to put the work in to be able to see the game.
Well, that is such a great point. You can't tell everything by just looking at the surface.
Right.
There's another version of this that has, remember The Giving Tree, that stupid book? I can't stand that book. But anyway, The Giving Tree, where the tree just gives until it's non-existent anymore. Well, somebody did one of these drawings, and yes, the picture is emotionally charged, and it gets us here. They took the Giving Tree, and they have one kid, that like is standing below the tree, and the apples are falling off the tree, and the kid picks up the apples. There's another kid standing on the other side of the tree. So the tree's leaning this way. He's standing on the far side of the tree and like, no apples. And they go, oh, so this kid's privileged, right? Then they have the next box. They give the two kids ladders. They give the two kids equal ladders. But of course, the kid on the side with lots of apples, he's getting more apples still, even with the ladder. I'm sitting there going, move the dang ladder. I like walk to the other side of the tree. There's no effort at all. Then they have this situation where they show, this is what we really need. And they like pull the tree back with rope so the tree is equal distant, whatever. Well, someone came in and fixed that one, and I absolutely loved it. It had the first kid motioning to the second kid, hey, come over here. I got an idea. The two kids band together. One climbs and is throwing the apples down to the second kid, who's putting them in a basket and selling them. And now they're a little capitalist. They started a little apple selling business. And I thought, this is exactly right? If you want to teach kids about problem solving, and you got the apples are falling on one side of the tree, the answer isn't, wah, I don't have apples. The answer is, how do I solve my problem to get apples by either working with somebody else, or like you said, building the box, or in some way, what can I do to solve my own problem? And the stories of people who've done that are legion, but we're not, Black History Month. Why are they not reading about how Frederick Douglass did exactly that? Okay. There are people throughout history who were literally oppressed, who still did exactly that. Clarence Thomas's own story is similar to that. But instead, we're teaching these kids that nope, if you were born, if you were born, in this Black or whatever, sorry, too bad, so sad. Until those people do something differently, you're stuck. That's a terrible message.
Mm-hmm. That's all. Go ahead.
I was just going to go back to your website, because what I see you guys doing is producing something that is empowering and tells kids the polar opposite of that. That yes, there's skills you need to learn, but when you learn them, you will have the power. You will have personal power. You will have personal knowledge, and you will be able to chart a course for yourself that doesn't require other people to either give you something or do something for you, or it doesn't, you don't need to steal. You don't need to take something somebody else has.
Right. So we all, as adults, we have to use a lot of these things. And again, nobody's really teaching their kids all of these things. And we all try to do our best. And at the end of the day, sometimes we get home, we're tired. We just want to get the kids fed, get them to their ball practice, and then get in bed. And that's it. But what we're trying to do here is take back control a little bit and give parents the opportunity to sit down with their kids and have a real discussion. And maybe you don't know what that discussion needs to be on, because again, you're tired. You may not be thinking, what am I going to talk to my kids about tonight at dinner time? But we will send out the lesson. So if people go to the website, and what you're not seeing there on our site is a pop-up box would pop up when you first go to the site. There you go.
There it is.
And ask for your name and email address. If you missed that, it's at the bottom of pretty much every page as well. But we will send an email twice a week, once on Mondays, once on Thursdays, of topics to teach to your kids. And we're not saying that we are the experts. And so, in fact, one of those paragraphs down below says we are not experts. We are not perfect. Our kids aren't perfect. In my opinion, they know a lot of things that kids do not know. Both of our families, Luke's oldest is 13, mine's 14. We can leave them at home by themselves and trust that the oldest kids are going to make dinner. In fact, I did that last night. I got home from work early. My wife and I said, you know what? Let's go out to a movie. We went out to dinner and a movie. Didn't even ask my daughter what she was going to make for dinner. She's 14. We took the baby with us, but didn't ask what she's going to make. And we got back home in the evening. She had a couple of the younger kids ready for bed, ready to go. And that's not bragging on us. And I know Luke's kids can do the same.
Mhm.
I've seen them do it. So we're not bragging on our kids saying we're just better or we're better at teaching. The point is we make a point, I guess, to sit down and teach our kids these skills. So in these emails, we want to help the parents teach their kids these same skills so they can function when they leave the house. When they go off to college, are they going to be able to cook a meal, or do they have to go eat McDonald's all the time? And I say college, obviously there's dining commons.
It is dinner time. That does sound pretty good right now, though.
Fast food, it doesn't really ever sound good to me.
He's healthy. He's
There's
healthy.
a couple that I'm okay with, and Luke knows this. We joke about this all the time, but not a big fan of most fast food. But the point is, when you go off, or let's say when you graduate college, you're done at the dining commons and you get your first job, or you don't go to college, you go straight to the workforce, decide to move out on your own. What are you going to cook? What are you going to have for dinner when mommy's not there to do all the cooking for you? Is it going to be fast food or like that? It's time you have a little bit of money coming in and your car could use an upgrade.
Right.
Is it wise to go buy a car with a $700 payment when you're making $40,000 a year? I don't know, but maybe going through some of this, talking to your kids, you can help them make those decisions before that comes up, or before your kid went out and got that $700 payment. And now you can't really do anything about it until you're right side up on the car payments, or you owe less than what it's worth, or the mistake has been made in some cases. So let's talk about it before those mistakes are made.
Deb, a very, very simple picture every single parent can relate to is teaching your kid how to tie their shoes. And so think about it. When do we typically teach them to tie their shoes? It's when we are out the door, or trying to get out the door, trying to load all the kids into the vehicle. Little kids staring there, holding the shoes, frustrated. Oh my gosh, why can't you just do this? And so we're frustrated, and what we're doing is we are reacting. We do it too. I promise you we do it. But that's the common thread with every single thing here. Instead of waiting until your kid gets fired from a job because they don't know how to talk to people, or they fail the class because of whatever the reason, how about we teach them these things now instead of reacting to it when it happens? We all react to things. We have teachable moments. I got that, and I'm glad we have that. But I don't have time to make every mistake in the book. I have got to learn from others. And sometimes we got to sit our kids down and say, look, this is how to do this. This is why to do this. To Brian's point about food, when I was a young soldier, my wife pulled me out of the depths of despair with this one. I'd Korea, Fort Bragg, jumping out of planes. They finally sent me off of a military base to central Minnesota, where I was going to go help recruit for more active duty people for about 3 years. Well, I got a 1-bedroom apartment, no bed, no couch, no chair. I had a computer. I had no plates. I had no spoons, no forks, no cups. I slept on the floor with no furniture. I had a little 13-inch TV with a little DVD player on the side, I had a little space heater. This is in an apartment. All I have to do is go buy the stuff. I ate out, I think, 3 meals a day for about a year and a half until my wife grew me up. Now, here's the thing. When I left high school, I was used to everything being done for me when it comes to food. So I can appreciate this. Then I joined the military, 3 meals a day. Just go to the dining facility. Then all of a sudden, I was on my own. I may have been 26, but when it comes to this topic, I was immature. I had some growing up to do. Um,
But the other thing is, well, really to go back to, when you're talking about proactivity, and a lot of people who are purveyors of SEL will say, that's all we're trying to do is be proactive and get out ahead of the mental health, blah, blah, blah. And I would argue that what you guys are offering is a better sort of preventive against mental health problems
yes.
than what they're offering. And here's my argument. Tell me if this holds any water. Okay. I'll throw it out there. You guys can pick it apart.
We're ready.
I believe that we feel good about ourselves after we achieve something. Once we know that we can do a thing. That little kid that you taught to tie their shoes feels better about himself the day after he learned to tie his shoes than when he was standing there going, I can't tie my shoes. When he does it himself, I remember my 14-year-old when she was 3, she said, I do it myself. When she was able to put her clothes on her, oh, well, talk about pride. This kid was like, I did it myself. And what you're doing here is you're giving parents a way that is non-combative, okay, because it is proactive. It's not the reactive thing. And with teens, that's usually not good to be reactive. And you're giving the kids responsibility to do things for themselves that will absolutely make them feel more in control of their own lives and taking care of themselves. And there's a lot of peace that comes from that. If you talk to teenagers today, and I work with teens, one of the things that they'll tell you is, I'm afraid to grow up. I don't know how things work. For all that they're exposed to the outside world through this little box or whatever, they don't see how the sausage is made. They see everything's all shiny and filtered and, like finished product. Celebrities, beautiful, all the clothes, this, that, everything's finished. They don't see things necessarily in progress. And people buy houses. It's like, oh, look, I bought a house. They don't understand how that all happened. Got a job. How did that happen? Made this beautiful dinner. Look on Instagram, my beautiful meal. No clue how that occurred. They just know what happened. And that can create insecurity. Before, when we did get to see how everybody else was living their best life, we weren't as insecure. You give kids these skills, then they're sort of like, oh, I can do this. This isn't a mystery. I can do this. This doesn't take special talent or special staff or even lots of money. This is something that I have the power to do. And I really believe, even if they don't thank you like today, that day will come where they're like, thanks, mom and dad, because you had faith in me. You trusted me to leave me home and go to the movies and cook dinner for my siblings and watch them. And there's a tremendous sense of pride.
So, Deb, I can tackle this. I'm going to use an example of Brian's. When we first started sending our newsletters, Monday and Thursday at 9 a.m., that's when it'll hit your email. And on Monday, he said he did up the writing. I did one for this week. He did one on how to sell an idea. So let's just pause right there.
Yeah.
We are constantly as people, you, Deb, and Brian had to sell each other. Brian had to convince you I'd be a great podcast guest. Deb's like, I'd be a great podcast host. And you both had to convince each other you had something to offer the other person. We know that. Right? We had to sell that idea. Brian talked about as spouses, you got to sell that. That'd be a good spouse. Well, in the newsletter, I read that. I'm like, I'm going to use what Brian writes because I need this stuff too. So he had a whole write-up about taking your kid to the table and talking about selling an idea. Well, that was on a Monday. The next day, we had an opportunity for $275. We could send my 13-year-old. It's basically like a church camp. $275. Now, her name is Eve, and she heard about this. She's like, oh my gosh. How am I going to ask my parents for $275? So I said, here's the deal. Let's look over Brian's email. We talked about how to sell an idea. I want you to take the day, have an index card, have 5 or 6 points. And then tonight, the whole family, and all of us did it. My wife, myself, and 7 other kids watched her give a presentation in the living room, no electronics anywhere. Dad, and she was fidgeting. Her eyes, I think she actually had a real tear. And my wife was nervous. She wanted me to rescue her. And I didn't. I allowed her to get through the fidgets, through the nerves, the anxiety, and she hit all of her points. She fielded a couple immature questions from the younger kids, of course, but she got through it. Now, if I would have rescued her, What did she get? What did she gain? But because of that, her confidence just went up the roof. So to your point, doing something well and earning something will build how you feel about that thing. I am extremely confident that she knows how to sell an idea better than she did 2 months ago.
And that will go into everything else that she does. So if she has to sit and write a persuasive essay, for example, if she needs to go interview for a job someday, all of that, as you point out, that's selling. Like you're selling yourself, you're selling your ideas, all of that.
Mhm.
It just takes the sort of doing it, and practice makes better, right? Doing it, realizing I didn't die. It's like I thought I was going to disintegrate, and nope, that didn't happen. Wow, it actually, I got a positive response. Even if you don't get everything you want, if you don't get like ripped to shreds, that's still positive, right? Nothing terrible happened. And I feel pretty good about myself because I represented myself. I was heard. And what we know about teenagers in particular is they need to be heard out, even if the
Yeah,
answer is no. They want to know that you've given them a hearing. Like you've listened to what their points were, maybe said yes to some things, no to other things. You've explained why. That's relationship building too. So when we engage with our kids this way, using material like this, it also builds the relationship between the parent and the teen. And that is something that is like, I can't quite explain it other than to say that that's also a protective device.
yeah,
That close relationship that you have with kids when they are in a developmental phase of pulling away from you by necessity because they're growing up and they
that's
need to
right.
go do that. You need to launch them. So your relationship has to shift to a more advisory role, more of a, we talk about discipline, but what's the root of that? Discipleship, right? They're looking for your guidance. They're looking for you to help them make good decisions, not to tell them what to do, but just to be that advisor, not their friend, but their advisor, which is very different from the person who does your laundry and cooks your food and,
Mhm.
kisses your boo-boos. So I think people miss that, and they either totally disengage and let school do everything or let the friends on the internet do everything. And they go, I don't know teenagers or whatever. Or they get authoritarian. No, you can't go out. You can't do this. You can't do that. You'll burn the house down if you use the stove. You can't cook, that kind of thing.
Deb, if you ask any soldier, tell me the name of your drill sergeant at basic training. Everybody knows. But if you tell them, what'd you do on day 7 of basic training? Nobody knows. I remember the first time I jumped out of an airplane, the first time I shot a weapon in anger. These are significant emotional events from the military. So our kids, when they're older, they're going to remember, I believe, 2 things. They're going to remember the general feel of the house. Was it a feeling of they listened to me, they love me, or they're going to remember significant emotional events. So this thing with my daughter, when she had to sell an idea, it was nerve wracking to her, but she got through it. I believe this was a significant emotional event for her, that when she is an adult, she has young kids, she will relay these stories. And all I did, I read a few paragraphs that Brian wrote, and I thought, this is great. Let me be intentional with my kid.
Right.
It took one night. It just took one night.
Mhm. I think it also takes rewarding the kids and complimenting them on whatever they've done. So things that some of our kids are doing, and obviously other kids do this too, but things that they're doing, we have to remember that, I'll use mine as an example. My daughter making a complete meal without us asking what she's making when we're gone. It didn't start out that way. It started out as, I still remember, and she would be embarrassed if I even say this, but when she was little, she would cut up our fruit. And people coming over, Michaela, can you cut up fruit? And I'd call it Michaela's famous fruit salad. Nothing nothing to it, just cutting up some grapes in half, cutting up strawberries, things like that. But we would compliment her and tell everybody, not not too crazy with it, but just say, Michaela made the fruit salad today, or Michaela made the fruit. And then it moved into, Michaela, can you make brownies? We're having people over for dinner. Would you mind helping us make brownies? And she's just reading off the box. And we do that. Guys, well, Michaela made the brownies today. And then it goes on to a simple meal and then more extravagant meals. And we have to remember that they are kids, even if they're teenagers, they're young adults that haven't done this before. So when they do something well, we need to make sure that they know what they know, we know what they've done.
Yep.
I think I said that right. So
That was good.
Yeah, so compliment them on what they've done. Uh, I guess a behavior that is rewarded gets repeated. So
Yeah.
if you want your kids to do that, to cook the meals, to do things, reward them for what they've done, compliment on what they've done, and hopefully that will be repeated more and more.
Yeah. And the nice thing too is what you're also pointing out, because you homeschool, is that your kids have the time and headspace to do some of this stuff. Because what I've noticed is when kids go to school, they come home and they're absolutely spent.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember when my kids were in school, they were homeschooled now, but they were just like drained, just squeezed right out. There's nothing left, and then they had homework to do besides. And that was one of the things, honestly, there's there's the woke stuff, there's all these other problems with school, but I'll be honest with you, even if you took all of the woke out, the structure of school, the drilling of school, the hurry up and wait of school, the arbitrariness of so much of it, I think is no way to spend a childhood.
It
It's
teaches, yeah, it teaches people how to. Well, schools were set up to when they need more factory workers, so it teaches kids how to go to work. And the bell rings, you get your 5 minute break. Bell rings, you have to be at your next class or your for work. You're back to your assignment. Do your work. Bell rings, you get 30 minutes for lunch. Bell rings, back to class. Finally, bell rings at the end of the day. I'm done. I can go home and rest and go back the next day and do the same thing. And what homeschool does is almost the opposite. Have some freedom here. Get your schoolwork done. But as my kids, some were doing school this afternoon. They were busy this morning doing other things. But typically, wake up in the morning, go do your schoolwork. And the benefit that we teach our kids is if you get in there, get the schoolwork done quickly, you have freedom in the day to do what you want. And obviously, they're kids. They can't just do anything they want, but they can choose how to spend part of their day because they got their schoolwork done. If they drag it out and take their time doing all their schoolwork, maybe they are working on it all day. But that teaches them that this is your decision on how this day is going to go. You get to choose.
Well, that's what's so funny to me about SEL. They talk about, responsible decision making. I'm like, I think the most responsible decision a kid in school, and you're like, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm not gonna do this anymore. Like that's not an option. And the reality is there are very few decisions they get to make in the day at school. Everything pretty much is assigned, including when they can go to the bathroom, they have to ask
Yep.
permission. And I think it's not easy. In fact, it's almost impossible to be excellent or to pursue excellence as an individual in a school environment. And it's almost frowned upon because the goal there is conformity. It's stick coloring inside the lines, all that kind of stuff. The number of risks you can take in a homeschooling environment, and then the reward that you can perceive having done so. Or if you fall down and fail, it's you fail in a way that is constructive, not just, oh my god, I failed, it's on my permanent record, right? And you can actually learn something from it. And I think what you're doing here with these lessons is you're giving all parents something to use. So it's not just homeschoolers. Anybody can do this.
Right.
But I think what I hope is that people who would sign up for your newsletter and use some of these lessons in their home will realize as they're doing this, I could teach my kid more things, or my kid's capable of learning more things, to maybe even move away from school, because this gives you, that head start that this
Confidence.
isn't so hard.
Right.
So we're not here to make a pitch for just homeschooling. We clearly would if that's what this was about. But parents, no matter where your kids are getting their education from, they need this intentional talk.
Yeah.
It also shows them that you care about them. So,
Yes.
sweetheart, I love you so much. Let's have a conversation about social media. Dude, I love you so much. Let's have a conversation about pornography. Girl, I love you so much. And this is what our last 16th thing is going to be. I love you so much. Let's talk about how to have an intimate and a friendly relationship and how to build that correctly. Now, Brian and I also come from a place of faith. This is the Bible is our faith has been a cornerstone for where we get this stuff from. And you don't have to share our faith to do this. An atheist can do this, a Christian can do it, a Muslim, a Hindu, that part does not matter. We are trying to pitch, be intentional with your children. You know what's best for your children, not somebody that spends, gosh, teaching in a physical building 1/3 of my class period. And I'm pretty good at classroom management, thanks to the military. But 1/3 of my class period would be classroom management. Get off your phone, take your earbuds out, stop this, do this, get in the. And these poor kids, the high performance kids, they're like sitting around.
Yeah.
They're not learning anything. They're watching disruptions. That's what they get. It's tough.
Well, to your point about the biblical lens, we were talking before the broadcast about how well, I personally think it's sad that we have to get into these conversations about, oh, we can't use the Bible because religion or whatever. The Bible, whether Americans, you don't have to love it. It just happens to be true that the Bible is a book that has stood the test of time for both Jews and Christians, but even, by the way, even for Muslims. The Abrahamic faiths are all kind of derived from the same, one God idea. And it's still a book with fantastic advice. You don't have to believe every single thing in it. You don't have to subscribe to it like it's a set of, strict laws and rules of every single page. But when the things you've pulled out are a lot of common sense and a lot of good advice, no matter who you are. And it also supports some of the values that we as Americans have held dear for 240 some odd years, right? We may not be a Christian country, but we were built on Judeo-Christian values, and this idea of individual liberty has its roots in this philosophy, for lack of a better word. Okay. We created a society where we were free to do what we ought, not free to do whatever we want. And because, even if you are free to do a lot of what you want, it doesn't follow that's the right thing to do. And certainly where our children are concerned, that's not the message we want to give either. So where do you go? Even, like, where would I go? Where would somebody, even who's an atheist, go for some guidance, some good guidance on like, what would the right thing to do be? Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the Bible, at least as a starting point. Now, there'll be other books I might look at too. I'm sure other parents might say the same, but I really wish people wouldn't have such a knee-jerk reaction if they're not Christian, for example, have such a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, that's not for me because Bible. Don't write it off, because you'll find if you read through these, there's a lot that I think almost all of us would agree with. It, like, find the fault. Like, where's the part? What's the part you disagree with?
Yeah,
right?
and so what I hear you saying is, where's our foundation come from? And if you don't want to
Exactly.
claim the Bible, got it. But I am curious what it is, and we
Right.
can't
I
say,
mean,
well,
something.
yep, and we cannot say, well, just because my parents taught me. What if you had a dad that beat your wife? Is that good behavior that you're going to follow? Clearly not. So just because you learn something from your parents does not make it right and does not make it good. Well, it's just where I live and my experience and my culture. Slavery was a perfectly accepted cultural thing in the South if you're born in the 1830s.
Right.
If you're German and you're born in 1935 in Germany, you were taught these. So we can't say culture. We could go on and on about culture. We have to take a stance. And I do believe, Deb, in about 20 or 30 years, maybe 40, our time frame and our current culture will also be judged.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So what
I wonder
is
how many people
truth?
in 20 or 30 years are going to admit that they supported the pronoun thing and they supported giving puberty blockers to minors and they supported all that. How many people do you think are going to still admit that? Oh, no, oh, not me. No, what?
Well, I'd appreciate if you would refer to me as a black lesbian. Why can't I be? Why can't I be?
Exactly.
So, yes, I think people will look back and all jokes aside, I would like to get through the next 20, 30 years saying to my children, we took a stance on truth.
Right.
And kids, we pulled you to the table and we talked about truth. The
Right.
world will try to run you ashore and get you all crazy. Stand on truth. And parents, even if you have a different faith, again, that's not the point. Not really to me. It's you being intentional with your children. Because this,
Right.
if you're not intentional, this won't just magically happen.
Yeah, because, reality has a funny way of continuing to be reality, whether you deny it or not. It doesn't care.
That's right.
It's like, I'm sorry, rain still falls down.
Yep.
It's not
My
doesn't
my
go the other
facts.
way.
The facts don't care about your feelings.
No, they really
Mhm.
don't. And so much of who we are is how we respond, as you talked about the egg and the tennis ball. how we respond to the things that happen to us in life, because some things will happen to us, and that's going to be maybe like 10% of our life outcome. And the other 90% is how we deal with what happened to us, and the choices that we make around where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned resilience. You said that the training had the word resilient in it. And I've been trying to orient people actually away from the word resilient and towards the word anti-fragile,
I like
because
it.
I resilient is good, but anti-fragile is better. And here's my argument for that. Resilient is like the tennis ball, the rubber band, it bounces back, but it's not necessarily any better than it was when you threw it against the wall. Okay. So anti-fragile is I got thrown against the wall. That probably hurts, right? But I came back a better, stronger tennis ball for having been thrown at the wall, or whatever the thing happened. I came back stronger. You talk about jumping out of a plane. You talk about these different experiences that you had to cope with, right? That grit is what gets you through, but anti-fragility is what brings you back stronger than you were before it happened. Now, that's not an argument for having bad things happen to you. Please don't anyone hear me saying everyone should be bullied or anything, bad things happen.
Right.
What I'm saying is that if we instead, and this is where you remember the sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, whatever. There was a little hint of it in there. It's kind of like, that may happen to me, but I'm still strong, and that's not going to take me down. That's not going to take me down. And we've stopped giving that message to our kids. But the human being, the human species is anti-fragile. We're designed that way. We're designed to heal when we break our bones. When we get a cut, it heals over. When we get scar tissue, okay, we go and we lift weights, right? That's actually sort of tearing at your muscle fibers a little bit. It's damage, but it's stronger for having done it. We're literally built to be anti-fragile. And I think when we can explain to our kids that, yes, we're putting you in a situation where we're asking you to do some things that are uncomfortable, like with your daughter. This isn't going to be comfy cozy. It's pushing you outside that zone. This isn't a safe space. This is a brave space, right? You're gonna get up there. You're gonna do this thing, but when you're done, you will look back on how you felt before you did the selling thing, and it will be harder for you to imagine feeling that way ever again.
I wish I could wrap up your last 10 seconds and just pitch that to. Yes. And it's a choice, right? Do we want to be stronger or not? Do we want to be fragile or not? Do we want to have grit or not? Do we want to toughen up or not? I'm not saying no emotion, but I mean, do we want to be tough, or do we want everything? Stop being in such a rush to be offended. Why is everyone in a race to be offended first?
Right. I would rather think of myself, and you talk about identity, right? I would rather think of myself, and I hope my kids do too, as a survivor rather than as an endurer. Okay. Or a person who coped.
Yep.
I don't want to just cope. I want to survive. I want to thrive. I want to, like, coping is for right this second. But the point of coping is to get to the other side of whatever thing. When George Washington is there on this frozen river, Christmas Eve or whatever it is, there's no shoes on the feet of the soldiers. It's abject misery. I mean, this is it. If he doesn't win this, this doesn't come up, they lose the war pretty much, right? And
we're talking about crossing the Delaware for some
Delaware. And there they are. And it's like, you're coping with the freezing cold. You're coping with the fact that you're starving. You're thirsty. You realize, like, we're probably going to lose. God only knows what's on the other side. These Hessians. Oh my God. Right. So you're coping with that. But when you get to the other side, it is time to shine. Like, now it's that you're not still coping. You're fighting. You're doing your thing. That's when you have to be anti-fragile. And I think that's the part that's missing. And what I see and what you're putting together is a set of tools that build that capacity.
There's even a specific item Brian put in there, knowing your limits and getting out of your that's one of them in there. Brian could talk about that for hours.
Yep. Exactly. Knowing your own limit.
Right.
I did want to ask Brian, though, since you run a business, do you hire people? Do you have to hire people?
I used to.
Okay.
So when I bought the business, I'm trying to think if there were any employees right then. And it's a family business. So I worked for my dad. Now my dad works for me. He's semi-retired. He leaves in 2 days for 3 weeks to Florida. So he works for me when he wants to work for me. And then my brother is in college. He's a lot younger than me. Same parents, everything. Just he's 22 and about to graduate college. So he works for me right now. But when the first few years, I did have employees, and the business was a little bigger. We did a lot more work, and I did not enjoy the process because it's tough having employees that I'm trying to think of how to put this exactly, but they want to work on their own time. They wanted 3 times their worth in pay, and if they didn't show up a day or two, it was my fault when I would get frustrated and say, guys, I had a job scheduled for this day. You didn't show up. Take some responsibility for this. Well, I was sick. I get it, but
That's why I was asking. I was
you
asking
didn't even
because I've
call,
seen
you
these
didn't say a
problems.
word, you just didn't show up. And then that happened 2 days in a row, and I have no idea. And then you just showed up on let's say Wednesday. You just showed up on Wednesday with nothing. And it happened over and over, and I just got tired of it. So I said, I want to be happy in my work, so I'll just run it with myself, my family. Occasionally somebody else jumps in, helps us out a little bit, but no, just a family business now.
I tried to work with him on one job, but he made me go through DEI training first. So I said no more.
Well, you guys, this has been so great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I'm so excited about what you're doing, and I'm going to put this up on the screen. Everybody watching, these16things.com. Go there, sign up for the newsletter, start implementing these lessons with your own kids. What would you say is the low end of the age range for this, and like where do they start?
I would say, you can start at any age. So low end, we had somebody sign up as a 5-year-old.
Yep.
And I would say that's probably around the low end, around 5 years old.
You got it.
They're not going to start really getting the lessons until they're a few years older than that, but build a good base for sure. Build a good base. And then the high end is, we're talking to parents, so kids at home, but I've had people come up to me and say, dude, I'm an adult, I'm in college, or I'm just out, and I am learning from your lessons, and I have no kids to teach at home. So it geared towards parents of teenagers. You can go, kids a little younger, and even young adults. I mean, we learn from doing these too, so everybody can learn from it, but they're going to be geared towards parents of teenagers.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me and talk with my audience. And I really appreciate it. I hope everybody, signs up for this. And I'm really excited to see how this grows and turns into more. So and I want to know how that exam goes there, Luke, after you take it.
I almost, for demographics, I want to call myself like a Pacific Islander or non-binary. Maybe my demographics will help me pass. I don't know.
Well, we'll see. I'll be very curious to find out what was on the test when it's over. So anyway, well, thanks to everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. And please like, share, subscribe. And if you're interested in this sort of content, or you have something to add to it yourself, please send me a note at thereasonwelearn@gmail.com. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.